This documentary is prepared using historical research and academic sources. It examines one of the most consequential political figures of the 20th century from an analytical perspective. History has seen many dictators. Few altered the global order as dramatically as Adolf Hitler. He did not rise in a vacuum. He rose from instability. After World War I, Germany was politically fractured and economically devastated. The Treaty of Versailles imposed territorial losses, military restrictions, and heavy reparations. Hyperinflation in the 1920s wiped out savings. Trust in institutions collapsed. In unstable societies, extreme ideologies gained traction. Adolf Hitler joined the National Socialist German Workers' Party in the early 1920s. At the time, it was a fringe political movement. Through propaganda, emotional rhetoric, and exploitation of public resentment, the party grew rapidly. This growth was not accidental. Last time, we explored the fragile peace that followed the Great War. Now, we delve into the turbulent years that saw the world plunged back into darkness. In the heart of Europe, Germany was a nation adrift. The Treaty of Versailles had left a bitter taste, imposing harsh reparations and national humiliation. The economy was in shambles, crippled by hyperinflation in the early 1920s. People saw their life savings turn to worthless paper overnight. Imagine a wheelbarrow full of cash, just to buy a loaf of bread. This economic despair created a fertile ground for extremist ideologies. Amidst this chaos, a charismatic and powerful speaker began to capture the nation's attention. He promised to restore Germany's former glory, to tear up the hated treaty, and to provide jobs and stability. His movement, built on a foundation of intense nationalism and scapegoating, offered simple answers to complex problems. Rallies became spectacles of power and unity, drawing in millions who were desperate for hope. They saw a strong leader who could pull Germany out of the depths of its despair. By 1933, this movement had seized control, and the democratic Weimar Republic was dismantled. The stage was set for a radical transformation of German society. Once in power, the regime moved swiftly to consolidate its authority. Political opposition was crushed, civil liberties were extinguished, and a powerful propaganda machine began to shape public opinion. The economy was mobilized for a massive rearmament program, which defied the Versailles Treaty but drastically reduced unemployment. Further solidifying the regime's popularity, the focus was on creating a racially pure and dominant nation. And this ideology would have devastating consequences. The persecution of minorities, particularly Jewish citizens, began systematically, escalating from discriminatory laws to organized violence. This was the dark prelude to the horrors that would follow. With its military rebuilt and its people mobilized, Germany began to aggressively expand its borders. In 1938, Austria was annexed into Anschluss, followed by the Sudetenland region of Czechoslovakia, which was ceded to Germany after the Munich Agreement. A policy of appeasement by Britain and France, who were desperate to avoid another war. But this policy only emboldened the aggressor. In March 1939, German troops marched into the rest of Czechoslovakia, shattering the illusion that territorial ambitions could be satisfied. The world held its breath as the final diplomatic efforts failed and ultimatums were ignored. War was no longer a possibility. It was an inevitability. On September 1st, 1939, German forces invaded Poland. This was the final straw. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war on Germany, and the Second World War began. The conflict initially saw breathtaking success for the German military's new blitzkrieg, or lightning war tactics. Poland fell in weeks. The following spring, Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France were all overrun in a stunningly rapid campaign. By the summer of 1940, Britain stood alone, facing the threat of invasion and enduring a relentless bombing campaign known as the Blitz. The war had escalated from a European conflict into a global struggle for survival. The war expanded even further in 1941. In June, Germany betrayed its non-aggression, pact with the Soviet Union, and launched a massive invasion, opening a brutal new front in the east. Then, on December 7th, Japan, Germany's ally in the Axis powers, launched a surprise attack on the US naval base at Pearl Harbor. This act brought the industrial might of the United States into the war, transforming the conflict into a truly global phenomenon. Alliances were solidified. The Axis, led by Germany, Italy, and Japan against the Allies, a grand coalition led by Great Britain, the Soviet Union, and the United States. The fate of the world hung in the balance. The war's turning points came in 1942 and 1943. In the east, the German advance was halted at the brutal Battle of Stalingrad, a catastrophic defeat from which their army never fully recovered. In North Africa, Allied forces pushed the Axis out, and in the Pacific, the U.S. Navy began to turn the tide against Japan. The industrial and manpower advantages of the Allies started to become overwhelming. On June 6, 1944, D-Day, the Allies launched the largest amphibious invasion in history, landing in Normandy, France. This opened the long-awaited Western Front, squeezing the German war machine from both east and west. The end was now in sight, but it would be a bloody and destructive road. As Allied armies closed in from all sides in 1945, the full horror of the regime's crimes was laid bare. Soldiers liberating concentration camps discovered scenes of unimaginable suffering and mass murder. The Holocaust, the systematic, state-sponsored genocide of 6 million Jews and millions of other victims, remains one of the darkest chapters in human history. In Late April, with Soviet troops fighting in the streets of Berlin, the leader who had promised a 1,000-year empire died in his bunker. Germany surrendered unconditionally on May 8, 1945. In the Pacific, the war continued until August, ending only after the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ushering in the nuclear age. The Second World War was the deadliest conflict in human history, with an estimated 70 to 85 million fatalities. Cities lay in ruins, economies were shattered, and entire populations were displaced. The geopolitical map was redrawn, the old European empires crumbled, and 2 new superpowers emerged: the United States and the Soviet Union. Their ideological rivalry would define the next half-century. In a period known as the Cold War, the world also came together in an attempt to prevent such a catastrophe from ever happening again, forming the United Nations. The legacy of the war is complex. It is a story of immense destruction and loss, but also of incredible resilience, sacrifice, and the ultimate triumph over tyranny. Join us next time as we explore the post-war world and the beginnings of the Cold War. Thank you for watching.